In the dense, humid jungle where sunlight barely pierced the towering canopy, Aaron moved with the silent grace of a predator that knew every inch of his territory. His muscular frame rippled with power beneath a coat of striped orange and black. Those scars mar his hide, tangible reminders of battles fought and dangers overcome. The jungle, vibrant and teeming with life, was his domain, yet survival here was no simple task. Every day was a delicate dance of hunting, avoiding rivals, and lately, steering clear of the humans encroaching upon the jungle's edge. The damp air carried a mix of scents, earthy leaves, decaying wood, and the faint traces of unfamiliar intruders. Aaron's amber eyes narrowed whenever he caught wind of these human markers, his steps cautious but watchful. He was a solitary tiger, and he knew well the peril humans could bring. Today was no different. The afternoon was warm and heavy, clouds gathering above with the promise of more rain. It was the wet season, and brief showers turned the jungle paths to slippery mud, masking scents and making hunting treacherous. Aaron's paws moved deftly, his senses attuned to every shift in the wind. He had just finished marking the northern edge of his territory, a ritual as instinctual as it was essential, when something unusual caught his attention. Mixed in with the earthy aroma of the jungle was a faint scent, sharp and unmistakably human. Aaron paused, his ears flicking forward. This scent was different, carrying with it the tang of fear and exhaustion. Intrigued and wary, he turned in its direction, each step deliberate and silent. A short distance away, beneath the spreading roots of a massive tree, a small figure lay slumped against the trunk. Aaron stopped, hidden by foliage, and observed with keen eyes. The figure was a human child, a boy no older than 8, with dark hair matted from sweat and rain. His clothes were torn and muddied, his face pale and streaked with grime. Even from afar, Aaron could see the rise and fall of the boy's chest, slow, labored, as if every breath were a struggle. The boy's lips were cracked, and his small hands trembled. He was clearly weak, on the edge of consciousness, perhaps from hunger or sheer exhaustion. For a moment, Aaron's predatory instincts flared. The boy was vulnerable, alone, and Aaron was a tiger, a hunter. But there was no satisfaction in this thought. The scent of fear was strong, yet mixed with it was a fragility Aaron found oddly compelling. He remained still, watching. There were no other humans nearby, no sounds of frantic search or calling voices. This boy was alone, separated from whatever group he had come with. Aaron's nostrils flared as he took in more of the scent. Sweat, mud, faint traces of metal, and something sweet like fruit. He moved a step closer, breaking a small twig underfoot. The noise was soft, almost lost in the ambient hum of the jungle, but the boy stirred. He opened his eyes, a deep, exhausted gaze that flickered with momentary panic upon seeing the tiger's form looming in the shadows. Fear was there, but also something else, a tired acceptance. He did not scream. He barely moved, as if the effort to fear was more than he could manage. Aaron tilted his head slightly. There was something fragile about the boy's stillness, a raw and desperate need that pulled at instincts he didn't fully understand. He took another step, closing the distance slowly. He lowered his massive head, nostrils twitching, as he caught the boy's scent more fully. There was no threat here, only weakness. Memories of humans flooded back to Aaron, noisy, destructive, sometimes cruel. Yet this boy was none of those things. The jungle was an unforgiving place, and for a child to survive here alone seemed impossible. Aaron lingered, his instincts in turmoil, as rain began to softly patter on the leaves overhead. The gentle rhythm of the rain heightened the tension. The boy's eyes fluttered shut, his strength fading fast. Aaron's gaze never wavered. His kind was not meant to care for humans. Survival demanded ruthlessness. And yet, he remained, the pull of this strange, fragile life too strong to ignore. As mist curled through the trees, blending sky and earth into a hazy dreamscape, Aaron stepped closer, his breath warming the air near the boy's face. He stood, torn between instinct and something unfamiliar. Curiosity, perhaps. Whatever it was, it held him there as the rain fell, urging him to make a choice. Aaron remained motionless, his amber eyes trained on the frail boy who lay under the spreading tree roots. The jungle around him continued its cacophony, chirps, rustles, and the soft drumming of rain on leaves, but all of it seemed distant. Aaron's focus narrowed. He stepped closer, moving with a fluidity that spoke of countless hunts and patient stalking. Hunger gnawed at him, a familiar ache, but it was tempered by something he couldn't easily dismiss, a peculiar pull toward this vulnerable human. His instincts, sharpened by years of survival, warned him against drawing near. Yet, the boy's fragile breaths, shallow and ragged, held him in place. Aaron's nostrils flared, taking in more of the boy's scent. Beneath the dirt and dampness lay hints of fear, exhaustion, and something that evoked a long-buried memory, a scent that whispered of cubs in need, of life clinging by a thread. The tiger's muscles tensed, a ripple of uncertainty coursing through him. He knew humans to be dangerous, their presence a harbinger of noise and metal. But this boy was different, alone and weak. A soft rustle drew Aaron's attention, and his ears twitched. A jungle crow, black as midnight with eyes that gleamed like wet stones, fluttered onto a low-hanging branch. The bird had shadowed Aaron before, cawing and warning when humans strayed too close. Now, it tilted its head, seemingly curious about the scene below. The boy stirred again, his head lolling to one side as he weakly opened his eyes. His gaze met Aaron's, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Fear flickered across the boy's features, but faded quickly, replaced by a resigned weariness. He did not flinch, did not cry out. Aaron took another cautious step forward, his massive paws barely making a sound. When he lowered his head to sniff closer, the boy's breath warmed his nose, stirring the fine hairs. There was no scent of aggression, no threat here, only the faint traces of life, fading in the jungle's unforgiving embrace. The rain picked up intensity, droplets pattering harder against the leaves. Daniel, as Aaron would later come to know him, shivered violently. His thin, torn clothing clung to his small frame, offering no protection against the chill. Aaron pulled back, ears flattening momentarily. This was no place for weakness. The jungle devoured those who could not fend for themselves. And yet, despite every instinct telling him to move on, to hunt and forget, Aaron stayed. He turned his gaze upward, scanning the canopy and distant shadows. The crow cawed once, as if in warning, and then flitted away, disappearing into the rain-soaked foliage. Driven by a compulsion he did not fully understand, Aaron began to drag nearby leaves and low-hanging branches toward the boy. His movements were careful, deliberate. He used his body to shield Daniel from the brunt of the downpour, creating a crude shelter that offered minimal respite. The tiger's breath came in steady puffs, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Hours passed, the rain unrelenting. Aaron prowled the immediate area, never straying far from the boy. Scavengers, drawn by the scent of weakness, lingered at the edges of sight, their eyes glinting in the gloom. A low growl from Aaron was enough to send them scurrying, but their presence reminded him of the dangers that lurked. Daniel muttered incoherently in his weakened state, fragments of words lost to the rain. Aaron's ears twitched, catching the tone, if not the meaning. The boy spoke of home, of a place beyond the trees and rain, of warmth and safety. Aaron could not comprehend these words, but he sensed the desperation, the longing for a world that seemed impossibly far. This fragile life depended on him now, though it was a burden he had never sought. As night crept in, the jungle's sound shifted. Distant roars echoed through the trees, a reminder that Aaron's territory was not without threats. He would have to remain vigilant. A faint movement in the distance caught his eye, a lean shape slipping through the shadows. A leopard, its coat blending seamlessly with the jungle, watched with wary interest. Predators often cross paths, but this one's attention lingered too long. Aaron stood tall, his gaze unyielding. His growl, deep and resonant, carried a message. This was not prey for the taking. The leopard hesitated, muscles taut, before slinking back into the cover of darkness. For now, at least, the immediate danger passed. The boy stirred once more, opening his eyes to the darkening jungle. His gaze found Aaron, and though his voice was weak, he whispered a barely audible plea, a word that might have been help or simply a sigh of exhaustion. The tiger, sensing the boy's struggle, moved closer. He lay down, his body a barrier between Daniel and the encroaching night. Time stretched on, measured in the rhythm of their breaths and the soft drumming of rain. The boy fell into a fitful sleep, his small form pressed against the warmth of the tiger's side. The night noises grew louder, and Aaron's senses remained alert. He prowled around their makeshift shelter, ensuring no predators approached. The bond, fragile and tenuous, began to form. Aaron did not understand why he lingered, why he chose to protect rather than leave. The boy's presence was a disruption, a crack in the natural order of things. But as the rain eased and a pale moon cast its light through the canopy, Aaron's instincts softened. He was no guardian, no savior. Yet here he was, standing watch over a life that seemed to teeter on the edge. The night stretched on, and with it came new challenges. As dawn approached, the jungle began to stir. Aaron sensed it, the subtle shift that signaled another day of survival. The boy would need food, shelter, and protection, none of which could be found easily. For now, they had only each other, a tiger and a child in a jungle that would show no mercy. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger. But as Aaron glanced down at the sleeping boy, he felt a spark of determination. Together, perhaps they would find a way to endure. The first pale rays of dawn pierced the dense jungle canopy, casting faint shafts of light onto the damp earth below. Aaron's senses were heightened, every flicker of movement and shift in scent meticulously catalogued. He prowled around the small clearing where Daniel lay, still sleeping fitfully under the crude shelter of leaves and branches. The boy's breaths were more even now, but his condition remained fragile. Hunger gnawed at Aaron's belly, but the pull to protect, born of instincts he still did not fully understand, kept him close. The jungle stirred to life with the dawn chorus, birds calling, insects buzzing, and leaves rustling as unseen creatures went about their routines. This rhythm was Aaron's world, one of survival and ceaseless vigilance. Yet today, it was different. His ears caught a sound that set his teeth on edge, a low, resonant growl carried by the wind. Another tiger, younger and more aggressive, had crossed into his territory. Aaron's muscles tensed, the fur along his spine bristling. He knew what this meant. A challenge, a threat not just to him, but to the fragile life he guarded. The rival tiger's scent grew stronger, mingling with the earthy aroma of rain-soaked foliage. Aaron positioned himself between the boy and the encroaching presence, his amber eyes narrowing. He had fought for territory many times, but this encounter felt different. The stakes were higher. A low rumble emanated from his chest, a warning to any who dared approach. In the dim light, the rival appeared, sleek, powerful, and unafraid. The challenger's gaze met Aaron's, and for a tense moment, they regarded each other across the distance, two forces of nature poised to clash. Daniel stirred, the soft rustle drawing Aaron's attention for a split second. In that heartbeat, the rival moved, a blur of muscle and fury. The two tigers collided, their roars splitting the air. Mud sprayed as they grappled, claws raking, jaws snapping. The jungle erupted around them, creatures scattering from the violence of their struggle. Aaron fought with every ounce of strength, his body a whirlwind of fury and precision. He had experience, the scars on his body testament to battle survived, but the rival was relentless, driven by youthful aggression. For a moment, Aaron felt himself falter. The challenger pressed in, jaws closing inches from his throat. The memory of Daniel's fragile form, shivering and alone, surged through him. With a burst of energy born from primal need, Aaron twisted, using the force of his body to break free. Mud slicked his paws, but he found purchase, his claws digging deep as he countered with a powerful swipe. The rival staggered back, blood dripping from a fresh wound. There was no time to rest. Aaron lunged, his growl reverberating like thunder. The challenger met him again, teeth bared. Nearby, Daniel awoke to the sounds of their struggle. His eyes widened, taking in the scene, the blur of orange and black fur, the raw power unleashed in every movement. Fear clutched at him, but so did a strange, growing awareness. Aaron was fighting not just for himself, but for him as well. The realization sank deep, sparking a fragile determination. Daniel, trembling, crawled toward a cluster of roots that offered some cover. He watched, heart pounding, as Aaron and the rival clashed again and again, each strike echoing with the weight of survival. Minutes stretched into an eternity, but finally the rival broke. Injured and worn, it backed away, its eyes never leaving Aaron. With a final snarl, it turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the sound of retreating steps. Aaron stood panting, blood trickling from a gash on his shoulder. His eyes, fierce moments before, softened as they found Daniel. The boy was pale, his face streaked with dirt and tears. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thin but steady. Aaron did not understand words, but he felt their weight in the boy's gaze. The jungle was silent once more, the aftermath of the battle settling like a heavy blanket. Aaron staggered slightly, exhaustion creeping in. His instincts urged him to lick his wounds, to find safety, but another need took precedence, the boy. He moved toward Daniel, his steps slower but determined. The boy reached out, tentative but trusting, and placed a small hand on Aaron's head. The touch, so light yet so profound, bridged the gap between them. It was a gesture of gratitude, of hope. Aaron lay down, positioning himself protectively beside the boy. The sky above brightened as morning took hold. The jungle would not pause for them. Its challenges would continue. But for this moment, predator and prey existed as allies. The bond between them, born in desperation, solidified. There was no guarantee of safety, but together they had a chance, a fragile hope that refused to be extinguished. Hours passed. Aaron's ears twitched at every distant sound, his body coiled and ready. Daniel, too, remained tense, though exhaustion soon claimed him once more. When he awoke, the sun was high, casting dappled patterns through the leaves. Hunger gnawed at him, a reminder of the realities they faced. Aaron sensed it too, the boy's growing need. He rose, muscles protesting, and scanned the jungle. Hunting would be difficult with a human to guard, but it was necessary. He nudged Daniel gently, urging him to move. The journey deeper into the jungle began. Aaron chose paths that would keep them hidden, avoiding known predator routes and areas humans frequented. His senses remained sharp, every rustle, and scent a potential threat. Daniel stumbled often, his legs weak, but each time, Aaron was there, a silent presence offering support. The boy whispered fragments of memories, of a home he missed, of a family who must be searching. Aaron did not understand the words, but he recognized the longing. It mirrored the tug that kept him near. As they traveled, the rain returned, drenching the foliage and turning paths to mud. They pressed on, driven by necessity. The jungle offered little mercy, but in the midst of its harshness, an unspoken partnership formed. Aaron hunted small prey, ensuring the boy had something to eat. It was a delicate balance, enough to sustain without drawing attention. At night, they found shelter beneath overhangs and in hollows, Aaron's body shielding Daniel from the chill. The boy's strength grew slowly, each day a battle, each moment a test of their fragile bond. But danger was never far. One evening, as they prepared to rest, the rustling of leaves signaled another threat. Aaron's muscles tensed, his eyes scanning the dark. A small group of scavengers, drawn by the scent of weakened prey, crept closer. The tiger bristled, positioning himself between Daniel and the approaching danger. He let out a low, menacing growl, a promise that any who dared come closer would face his wrath. The scavengers hesitated, their hunger warring with caution. In that moment, Aaron understood the cost of protecting the boy: constant vigilance, ceaseless battles. Daniel, sensing the tension, pressed himself against Aaron's side. The bond between them, forged in survival, now held a deeper purpose. Together, they faced whatever came, their journey far from over. As the night deepened, Aaron's eyes never left the shadows. He would protect the boy, no matter the cost. As dusk fell over the jungle, a chill settled into the air, accentuated by the dampness left from the day's rain. Aaron's fur was matted with mud and streaked with dried blood from his earlier battle. He kept a vigilant watch over Daniel, who was curled beneath a canopy of branches, his small frame barely visible against the darkening foliage. Despite his fatigue, Aaron knew rest would not come easily. The jungle never truly slept, and for them, danger was always close at hand. Just as he began to pace, a sudden rustling in the underbrush made him pause. His body tensed, muscles coiled like springs ready to launch. Emerging from the shadows was not another predator, but a group of humans. They carried torches, their flames flickering and casting dancing shadows on the trees. Their movements were cautious, their eyes scanning the surroundings as if aware of the dangers lurking in every crevice. These were forest rangers, their clothing and demeanor marking them as protectors of the land. Yet to Aaron, they were intruders, and the sight of them made his hackles rise. The rangers moved with purpose, and their voices, though low, carry hints of urgency. One stepped ahead, his eyes widening when he saw Daniel lying beneath the branches. Relief washed over his face, but it was quickly replaced by alarm as he noticed Aaron standing guard. The torchlight reflected in the tiger's eyes, turning them into molten pools of amber fire. Aaron growled, a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath him. To him, the humans were a threat, their presence an intrusion into the fragile balance he had struggled to maintain. One of the rangers raised his arm, signaling the others to stop. "Stay back," he whispered harshly. "There's a tiger." Another ranger, younger and more impulsive, reached for the rifle slung over his shoulder. His hands trembled slightly as he aimed, the barrel glinting in the dim light. Aaron's eyes never left the weapon, his instincts screaming at him to defend, to protect. In that instant, Daniel stirred, a small, tired sound escaping his lips. The boy's eyes fluttered open, taking in the scene with growing clarity. "Don't," the words slipped from Daniel's lips, barely more than a breath. He tried to move, to speak louder, but exhaustion and fear sapped his strength. Still, he forced himself to sit up, his small hand outstretched toward the tiger. "Please don't hurt him." The rangers exchanged glances, uncertainty clouding their expressions. This was not a scene they were trained to handle, a child pleading for the life of a predator that by all rights should be a threat. The tension hung thick in the air, each heartbeat pounding like a drum. Aaron remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the humans. He sensed their fear, the hesitation that kept them rooted in place. He had faced human weapons before, the sharp crack of gunfire etched into his memories. But this time was different. The boy's fragile form, his desperate plea, anchored Aaron's resolve. He would not flee, not while the boy was vulnerable. He took a step forward, slow and deliberate. The young ranger's grip on the rifle tightened. The older one placed a hand on his arm, urging caution. "We can't kill it," he said quietly. "Not unless it attacks." The young ranger's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Daniel and the tiger. "It's too dangerous," he whispered, fear lacing his words. But the boy, pale and trembling, shook his head. "He saved me," Daniel said, his voice stronger this time. "He protected me." The words hung in the air, improbable and impossible, yet undeniable. The Rangers hesitated, torn between their instincts to protect the child and their fear of the predator standing so near. Aaron lowered his head slightly, a gesture that could be seen as either defiance or understanding. The torches flickered, casting shadows that made him seem larger, more imposing. For a moment, it appeared as though violence was inevitable. But Daniel, summoning what little strength he had left, pushed himself to his feet. He stumbled forward, placing himself between Aaron and the humans. "Please," he said again, his voice raw with emotion. "Don't hurt him." The young ranger lowered his rifle, his hands shaking. "This isn't right," he muttered, looking away. The older ranger nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Aaron. "Let's step back," he said, carefully. As they retreated, Aaron's body relaxed, marginally. He could sense the shift, the momentary reprieve. But he knew the danger was not over. Humans were unpredictable, their motives and fears impossible to fully grasp. He would have to remain vigilant. Rain began to fall once more, a soft drizzle that quickly soaked the jungle floor. The rangers spoke among themselves, debating their next move. One of them, a woman with a gentle demeanor, suggested that they guide the tiger away from human settlements, ensuring both the child's safety and the animal's protection. "This isn't just any tiger," she said softly. "Look at them." Her words hung in the air, filled with a mix of awe and uncertainty. They need each other. Daniel, exhausted but determined, refused to leave Aaron's side. The rangers eventually relented, realizing that separating them would only cause more harm. They decided to escort Daniel to safety while maintaining a cautious distance from the tiger. Every step was fraught with tension. Aaron moved with them, his eyes scanning the jungle for threats. He trusted no one but himself, and perhaps the boy who had become his charge. The rain fell harder, drumming against leaves and masking their scent. It offered a momentary cover, but also a reminder of how precarious their situation remained. Nightfall came swiftly, bringing with it a new set of challenges. The jungle's predators, emboldened by darkness, emerged from their hiding places. Aaron knew that their journey was far from over. He could feel the weight of the boy leaning against him, the tremble in his limbs. The bond between them was fragile, tested at every turn. And now, with humans involved, the stakes had risen higher than ever before. As they made their way through the jungle, the rangers' torches casting brief halos of light, Aaron's senses remained on high alert. He understood that trust, however tentative, had formed between him and the humans. But it was a fragile thing, easily broken. The slightest misstep, a flicker of movement mistaken for aggression, could end everything. He had seen it before. How quickly fear could turn to violence. The group paused beneath a broad-leaved tree, sheltering from the rain. The older ranger spoke quietly to Daniel, asking about his family, his home. The boy answered in halting words, his eyes never straying far from Aaron. The tiger, though silent, understood the importance of this moment. Humans would take Daniel away, back to their world, a world Aaron could never enter. But for now, they remained together, bound by a tenuous thread of trust and survival. The rain slowed, the sky clearing just enough to reveal a sliver of moonlight. Aaron's gaze drifted upward, then back to the boy. He would protect him as long as he could, even if it meant facing the dangers that lay ahead. The jungle was vast and wild, and their journey had only just begun. But in this brief respite, predator and prey, human and animal, stood together, united by the simple, fragile act of survival. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, and a fragile silence enveloped the clearing. The forest rangers, their torches flickering in the damp night air, exchanged cautious glances. They were in unfamiliar territory, both literally and figuratively, faced not only with a lost child, but a tiger that had, by some unfathomable instinct, taken on the role of protector. The gravity of the situation was not lost on any of them. Daniel clung to Aaron's side, his small hand resting lightly on the tiger's coarse fur. Every breath he took was a mix of relief and lingering fear. The older ranger stepped forward cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate. "We need to get the boy out of here," he said softly to his companions. "But the tiger, we can't risk provoking it." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement. The young ranger, who had earlier raised his weapon, shifted uncomfortably. He kept one hand near his rifle, but his eyes were no longer as hard. The sight of Daniel's desperate plea had softened the edges of his fear. Daniel, sensing their hesitation, spoke again, his voice weak but determined. "He won't hurt me," he said, his gaze never leaving Aaron. "He saved me." There was no room for doubt in his tone. The rangers listened, torn between disbelief and the undeniable truth of what they saw. Aaron, for his part, remained still, his amber eyes watching every movement. He understood that these humans could turn dangerous at any moment, but for now, they seemed willing to listen. Slowly, the lead ranger nodded. "We'll move together," he said, his voice firm but measured. No sudden movements. The group began their cautious trek through the jungle, the rangers forming a loose circle around Daniel and Aaron. The torchlight cast long shadows, making the jungle seem even more foreboding. Aaron's senses were on high alert. Every rustle, every shift of the wind could mean danger. He knew that trust was fragile, hanging by a thread. Any misstep could shatter it. The path was treacherous, mud sucking at their feet and tangled roots threatening to trip them. Daniel stumbled more than once, his exhaustion evident. Each time, Aaron was there, his body a solid presence against which the boy could lean. The bond between them had grown unbreakable, forged in moments of peril and mutual need. The rangers watched this interaction with a mix of awe and wariness. None of them spoke of it, but the sight of a boy finding strength in the presence of a tiger would stay with them forever. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the rain finally ceased. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and vegetation. The night was alive with sounds, chirps, rustles, distant calls, but there was an undercurrent of unease. Aaron felt it, a prickle at the edge of his senses. He stopped suddenly, muscles tensed. The rangers halted, their hands tightening around their torches. "What is it?" one of them whispered. No answer came, but the tension in the air spoke for itself. From the shadows emerged a small pack of scavengers, their eyes glinting with hunger. They had followed, drawn by the scent of weakness and the promise of an easy meal. Aaron stepped forward, his body a barrier between Daniel and the encroaching threat. He growled, a low, menacing sound that rumbled deep in his chest. The scavengers hesitated, their instincts battling hunger. For a moment, it seemed as though they might retreat, but hunger was a powerful force. The lead ranger's voice was low, urgent. "Stay close," he instructed, his hand reaching for his weapon. But before any action could be taken, Aaron lunged. His movements were swift, powerful, a blur of muscle and fury. The scavengers scattered, their courage failing in the face of such ferocity. One lingered too long, snapping at the air, and Aaron's claws flashed. The brief scuffle ended as quickly as it began, with the scavengers fleeing into the night, their cries fading into the distance. Aaron stood panting, his sides heaving. Blood smeared his fur, not his own, but a reminder of what he was capable of. The rangers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of relief and wary respect. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes wide with gratitude and fear. "Thank you," he whispered again, his voice barely audible. Aaron did not respond, but his body relaxed, the immediate threat gone. Morning came slowly, the first light filtering through the canopy. The jungle felt different in the soft glow of dawn, less menacing, but no less wild. The rangers knew it was time to leave. They spoke quietly among themselves, devising a plan to lead Daniel back to safety while ensuring Aaron could return to the depths of the jungle without incident. "He can't follow us," one of them said, a hint of regret in his voice. "It's too dangerous. For him and for us." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He understood what they were saying, but he couldn't accept it. "He saved me," he said again, as if those words alone could change their reality. The lead ranger knelt beside him. "We'll make sure he stays safe," he promised. "He belongs here. You have to go home." The boy nodded, his heart heavy. He turned to Aaron, his hand resting on the tiger's head one last time. "I won't forget," he whispered. Aaron met his gaze, a silent exchange that needed no words. As the rangers led Daniel away, Aaron watched. He did not move until they were out of sight, until the boy's scent faded into the distance. Only then did he turn, his steps slow and heavy. The jungle closed around him, the foliage swallowing his form. He returned to his territory, to the life he knew. But something had changed. The bond he had formed with the boy lingered, a reminder that even in the harshest places, connections could be forged. Daniel was reunited with his family, his story becoming a tale of awe and mystery. He spoke often of the tiger who had saved him, his words inspiring respect and wonder among those who listened. He grew up cherishing the memory of Aaron, returning often to the jungle's edge, never crossing the boundary, but always feeling the connection. For Aaron, life continued as it always had, hunting, surviving, maintaining his place in the wild. But on quiet nights, beneath the vast expanse of stars, he would pause, ears twitching, as if listening for a voice he would never hear again. The jungle was vast, its challenges unending. But within its depths, a bond had been forged, a fragile, fleeting moment where predator and prey had become something more. It was a story of survival, of trust against all odds. And as Aaron moved through the shadows, he carried that memory, a small spark of light in the darkness.